And he would know because he was.
Welcome, and we'll start off, of course, with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And going to the screen. And I'm going to do this. All right. So we're obviously just focusing on this one little paragraph, right? That's probably what all we're going to do this time around. But again, I'm trying to go a little bit more in depth. I need to ask anyone who is not muted to please be sure to mute. And of course, please unmute if you want to make a comment. So here we go. So the next verse goes on, Vera'ita b'shivya, and you see amongst the captives, right? You see amongst the captives. That's the verse, right, in the Torah. And he says, B'sha'at shivya. So what this is coming to emphasize is that it is at the moment when captives are taken, right? At the moment when captives are taken. So here we go. Let's make sure we got the right place. So this is ayin, footnote ayin, and let's find the footnote ayin. Right, here we go. Okay. Piresh Rashi. Rashi explains, Im natan einav ba mitchila. If he, this literally it means he set his eyes upon her at the very beginning. B'sha'at shivya, at the moment of, it could be captivity or her captivity. Velo, as opposed to shelakha lemochra, that originally he captured her to sell her, or leshivcha, or to make her a maidservant. V'acharkach, and then afterwards, natan einav ba, he then set his eyes upon her. Ad kan leshono. End of quote, Rashi. Vayitachen, and it appears, lomar, to say, the medayek zeh, that he makes this notation, this emphasis, midalo kativ, because it doesn't say, right, doesn't say, v'ra'ita bashevi, but it says v'ra'ita beshivya, uses a different word. And the word shevi, as he's going to go on to explain in a moment, is the word that is usually used for captives. So even though we're translating it as captives, the fact that the Torah uses a different word here forces us to say there must be something in addition that it's trying to tell us. So, shehutar, he says, this is a description, lishvuyim, of captives. That is, the word shevi is used to describe captives. Kamor. And now he gives examples. He is rigorous. He's trying to be rigorous. Vayashp mimenu, yes, mimenu shevi, right? They took captives. He took captives from him. Another in Parshat Chukat, in Numbers. And here again, et hashevi, the captives. Again, Parshat Matot, again, Book of Numbers. Ki yelchu bashevi, that they go in captivity, right? Or amongst the captives in Parshat Kitavo. Vezeh haya b'mashma, right? So he's saying, and this is to come to imply, shegam im tir'eh b'hashevi la'achar zman. Okay, so in other words, if it used the word shevi, then it would say, regardless, at some point you see amongst the captives there, Meshe enoken b'shivya, right? Which is not the case when it talks about the word shivya, right? Shehoraat Hashem hazeh, because the implication of this word, or maybe he means the connotation of this word, okay? He peulat halikud, it's the activity of conquest, the hatfisa, and seizure. So it's describing, the word shivya is a word to describe the the actual conquest and seizure taking place, moreh b'sha'at shivya gufa, which would teach, right? Moreh, it tells us or denotes, right? Denotes the very moment of captivity itself. So there's a specification here, so that we're limiting, right? We're limiting the amount of time you have to make this particular decision, to apply this particular law, which we know is it's a complicated law here. There's stuff that right, we said Dibra Torah keneged Yetzer Hara, and he's going to say, I think, a little bit more about that. That's really interesting. He's got some really neat stuff to say. All right, another short one, but again one that was giving us some pause, right? And it says Eshet, right? Eshet Yafat Torah. And we know that Eshet is in the construct state. In other words, woman of, for afilu Eshet ish. So it means even if she is married. Okay. Pagan, she's married to she's a pagan, she's married to another pagan, etc. And in this particular case, we discussed this a little bit at length back then. It is something that gives us pause. There's quite a bit about this section that gives us pause. But regardless, I think, there's lots to think about. So let's go on. I don't think he has a lot to say about this. He just discusses the grammatical issues here, all right? Let's go on here, Ayin Aleph. Medayek, again, he is making a diuk. He's making an emphasis. He's placing an emphasis. Midalo kativ isha yafat Torah. The fact that the Torah didn't choose to use the expression a woman of beautiful appearance, but it said eshet, right? Again, looking very carefully at the wording, at the actual wording in the Torah, and you can see that's part of what would function as a written Torah. That if it were not a written Torah, we would not be looking at words to the degree that we are analyzing them, but to analyze every word very, very carefully and very deeply. So, didn't say Isha Yafat Torah, could have. Doesn't say a woman of beautiful, appearance. It says a woman of, right? It uses that particular word. And this would have been a perfectly acceptable way to describe it. V'lashon eshet betmunat hasmichut, right? And the term eshet, right, in the appearance of being a possessive case, right, a smichut word, moreh, it connotes, but kama makomot, in several places, al eshet ish, regarding a married woman. And he gives an example, kamor eshet chayil, right, ateret ba'ala, the famous statement, a woman of valor is a crown to her husband. Nice statement, I think. Eshet Noarim, the wife of your youth. Eshet Britcha, the wife of your covenant. Ukidome, and similar examples. Next, here we go. Eshet, okay, so Yafat Torah, of beautiful appearance. Melamed, this teaches us, Shelo Dibra Torah Ela Keneged Yetzer Hara, that the Torah only spoke out in opposition to, or in relationship to, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, literally. And this is the rationale. Mutav sheyochlu Yisrael basar tumotot. It is better for an Israelite to eat the flesh that is on the point of death. Okay? Shchutot, which is nevertheless shechted, right? If an animal is considered that's one of the reasons they immediately examine the lungs of an animal after shchita. This is an irregular situation, and if there's certain adhesions found on the lungs, the animal is not considered kosher, because if it's considered to be an animal that would have died within the space of a year, and those adhesions in the lungs are considered an indication that certain types of adhesions, not every kind of adhesion, but certain types of adhesions, it would be considered such an animal that would have died by itself, right, in the course of a year, and such animals are rejected from being appropriate kosher meat. So in this case, we're talking about here relatively, right? Relatively speaking, that it's better for an Israelite to eat an animal that might die within the year or less, that is shchuta, that has been slaughtered properly according to the laws of shchita, va'al yochlu basar temutot nevelot, and better than they should eat similar animals that are on the point of death, which is a nevela. A nevela is an animal that is not killed properly. Okay.
Yeah, but the good Lord said that if the animal does that, dies, you can still give that animal to a non-Jew.
Non-Jew is not.
Don't waste it.
A non-Jew is not commanded to eat kosher meat, but Jews are commanded to eat kosher meat. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, you can. That's correct. You can sell it. You don't have to take a great loss. It would be a big loss. But if you want to sell it on the regular market, you can. But you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so here we go. So he has quite a bit to say about this, because it's an interesting point here. And it certainly sheds light on this whole mitzvah going on here, right? And to what sense it's certainly unlike any other mitzvahs. Here we go. Ritzono lomar. What he wants to say, what he's trying to say is, Bekoshi hetira haTorah yifat Torah, that the Torah, with difficulty, permitted the woman of, this beautiful woman, the captive woman, who's of a beautiful appearance. B'milchama, and in a case of battle, right? Rak mitoch, and the only reason it permitted this is mitoch shemitgareh ba yitzro, because he finds his desire uncontrollable, right? His lust becomes uncontrollable in that circumstance, because I suspect your emotions have to be at such a high pitch at that point. Yesh lachush, so one has reason to suspect, sheyizne be'isur, that he's going to go ahead and have relations with this woman regardless. By the way, I understand this is a very sad sort of thing, that in the World War II, in the Japanese army, they provided prostitutes for the army, for the men who were fighting. I just think it, to whatever relationship it has to what we're talking about here. So because one is suspicious that regardless of the proclamation not to have such things, he would go ahead anyway and have relations with her in a forbidden way. Hetiruhu, so for that reason they gave permission, the Torah gave permission to him, Lisa Ena, to marry her, Ukedim Lefaresh B'mashal, and as is explained in a mashal is like a parable, something like that, right? And that's the parable is the meat, right? Giving the example of meat that is going to die on the point that's timutot, but that is at least shchuta. It's not something we want to do, but sometimes you have to legislate in such a way so that you'll have compliance, because it's much worse to have to basically encourage scoff laws than to try and legislate in a way where people at least can follow it to some extent, even if it's not perfect. V'nafka mina bazeh, and we can derive from this, right? That she'im ein nafsho chashkaba. So, the practical difference is that if he does not desire her, nafsho chashka, that his soul yearns for her, right, or desires her, rak sherotzeh likach lo isha, that he isn't, it isn't that he's so in love with her, he's not completely crazy about her, but he wants to take her for a wife. He wants to marry a woman, and this is a pretty woman, he wants to marry her. Asur lo, it's forbidden to him, likach etzo. That's the implication, given the statement, Dibra Torah keneged yetzer hara. It's inappropriate. Not allowed to. Can't use this. And he goes on to say some interesting stuff. I think you'll enjoy this. I hope you do. The yesh laha'ir, and one can clarify, right, shed light, be'ikar klal zeh, regarding the essence of this particular, the nature of this particular law, this general rule. Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. This statement, the Torah, this general statement, the Torah only spoke against the yetzer hara, the evil inclination. You have to clarify this. Halo lefize, because according to this, lo shvakit kiyum, one basically has not allowed the upholding lechol mitzvot. In other words, could you take this rationale and apply it to every single mitzvah and say, they're not going to do this, they don't want to do this, they really, really don't want to do this. So we have to be able to legislate to deal with it. The nema, because we could say, de kevan she'efshar she'ya'avor be'isur, okay, because we could argue that there's a possibility that if we don't allow it, he's going to transgress it regardless. Natir lo sheyaseh beheter. We should derive a way to make it permissible, so that at least when he does this, he does it with permission. Okay, there's a danger there, right? V'yesh lomar. One can argue back. One can say, de lo ne'emar klal zeh, that this particular general rule was not stated, ela b'milchama, except in a case of warfare, in a case of a war. De az tzarich sheyeh ruach kol ish nachon b'kibur, because at that particular point, every person in a situation of war, a person has to be somewhat at ease. One has to be able to think straight, okay, when you're in war. V'lo yitza'er nafsho, and you don't want him to be so upset, right? Kedei sheyuchal la'amod bekoshrei milchama. Okay, so he should not be so unhappy, so upset, so disturbed that he would not be able to stand in the difficulties of a battle. Ukemevu'ar besof perek Parshat Shoftim, and as is clarified at the end of Parshat Shoftim, be'inyan hachozrim mima'arachot hamilchama. Right, there's this wonderful passage at the end of Parshat Shoftim last week, where the people that are the soldiers have to stand up, and the priests have to say a whole bunch of things. Who has built a home and hasn't had a chance to dedicate it? Who has taken a wife and hasn't had a chance to be with her, to consummate his marriage, whatever, right, or engaged to a woman. And the last statement is, who is afraid? Who is so afraid that they do not want to enter into war? They say it. And in that case, they can return to their homes. Vayitachen lomar, and one can say, it appears one can say, demi ta'am zeh, that based on this particular reason, you're gonna open your eyes, I'm telling you, hu tru kuchle de chazira b'milchama, that in warfare, when you're engaged in battle, bacon is permitted. You're allowed to eat bacon. Kemevo'ar bechulin, as is clarified in Chulin Yud Zayin Aleph 17a, Ulefanenu La'el, and before us above, Parshat Ve'et Hanan, in Parsha Ve'et Hanan, Pasuk Uvatim Mle'im Kol Tov, where it talks about, and houses filled with all good. So what we are saying is that when you're engaged in a battle, when you're engaged in warfare, when people are engaged in that situation, there are levels of desperation, there are emotions that you cannot even begin to imagine until you actually are under fire and actually have experienced an actual battle. Yeah, go ahead.
So Rabbi, lust must be the reason. A person in war sees a beautiful woman, the lust is there, and God says, well, I'm not going to, I'm going to let him do it because he'll do it anyway.
Correct. That's exactly it. And by the way, you know that already we've read, Rashi has made it very clear, that the rabbis are saying that if you go ahead and take advantage of this, the probabilities of it having an unfortunate consequence is very high. So yes, you can do it because, you're battling your Yetzer Hara, and your Yetzer Hara is taking over you. You cannot control your impulse. But just, whatever it's worth, because there are times when, let's be honest about it, our rational side and our impulses, our emotional side, are at war with each other. And the possibility of our rational side actually winning that particular battle takes a lot of personal training to be able to do that. But, the truth is that we give in to our impulses so often. It's such a struggle. But in this case, okay, I'm going to stop here, but there is some really cool stuff ahead of us as we go through the Torah Tmima on this particular issue. So I am going to take this. Here we go. So this next little piece, which is going to take a look at the word v'chashakta, right? And you should desire her. We'll look, please God, tomorrow. So I'm going to stop the share. Golda, you're welcome to say that out loud. I'm going to stop.
Bacon is a comfort food that travels well. I guess they didn't have beef jerky then, huh?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did have a dry meat. I just don't know. I think the point is that first of all, you know that an army marches on its stomach, correct? Right. Okay.
And dry socks.
Yeah. So being able to find food under those circumstances might be very difficult, right? They just mentioned, I was looking at some of the reports about what's going on in Kabul at this point, and they're saying that some of the fruit stands have opened up. But the point is, when this stuff is going on, guess what happens to the fruit stands?
Yep.
Right. And so
guess what happens to people not being able to get to their orchards to pick the fruit?
Correct. Yep. And are in fear of their lives, that if they venture out, they're going to get shot or captured or something horrible. I mean, I just imagining what it must be like for people in Afghanistan, in Kabul at this particular moment. It's so hard for us to appreciate the desperation that they must feel and the terror, the sheer terror that they have to feel in their hearts.
Look what happened when the temples were destroyed. Look what happened on the Nazis, the same way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you want to go there.
Oh yeah, sure.
Going into hiding.
The fall of France. Yep.
Yeah, the fall of France. Yeah.
I know.
What happened?
I know. Same kind of thing, by the way. They never imagined it would be so quick. So, if anybody wants to share, I'm going to stop the recording here, and God willing, we'll continue tomorrow.